There will definitely be a collection. Holy moly. I was kidding before. Good evening, everyone. 7 o'clock, we always start on time. Okay, let's begin with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Almighty God, as we gather here this evening to look at and appreciate one of the wonders of the world, St. Peter's Basilica, a grand church indeed, we are reminded that this building is nothing compared to us who are your church. We are the body and blood of Christ. And as we marvel at what human hands have built, may we appreciate what God's hands have done for us. Help us tonight to appreciate what this basilica stands for and the role of the man whose name it bears. And help us to truly appreciate the glory of God through the work of human hands. And this we ask through Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay. How many were here about 4 or 5 weeks ago when I gave a presentation on Rome itself? Okay, so some of you, maybe a third of you were. Last time we gathered together, we took a look at everything but St. Peter's. We took a look, first of all, at where Rome was located. And of course, this is Europe, Spain, Africa, Holy Land, Israel. The terrible fighting is still going on. You have Greece. You have Italy, characteristic because it's shaped like a boot. And Rome sits right about there, that little indentation. And Rome itself is a huge metropolitan city. It's the capital of Italy, so it's huge. It's huge. The historic area, which we looked at last time, runs from about here to about here. It's walkable, maybe a mile and a half, 2 miles tops. And last time we talked about the Colosseum, we talked about the Castle San Angelo, we talked about the Circus Maximus, we talked about the Pantheon and Victor Emmanuel Monument, we talked about the Trevi Fountain and the Piazza Navona, we talked about St. John Lateran, the great cathedral of Rome, we talked about St. Paul outside the walls where St. Paul is buried. We talked about St. Peter in chains, where the chains that bound Peter in Rome when he was in prison there are kept. We talked about St. Mary in Trastevere with this wonderful mosaic in the apse that shows Jesus with the hand around his mother that goes back into the earliest centuries of the church. We talked about St. Mary Major, which on the ceiling is the gold from the New World that was brought over there. And Mamertine prison, where Peter and Paul were held before they were taken to their martyrdom. Talked about the Roman Forum and some of the great obelisks in Rome. Now we're going to leave Rome. In fact, we're going to leave Italy, and we're going to go here, that little patch of green there. That is called Vatican City State. It is not in Italy. It is not in Rome. It's its own city. It's its own country. So when you go into Vatican City, you're leaving Rome. You're leaving Italy. You're going into Europe. And it consists of, it's the Basilica, St. Peter's Square, that looks like arms reaching out to the world, or it looks like a key, maybe the key of St. Peter. And you've got the Apostolic, this is like the residence where the Pope usually lived for a few hundred years, and some other residence lives there, I don't know. The Vatican Museums, Sistine Chapel, some administrative building, and the Vatican Gardens. You can walk around the whole country in 45 minutes. So it's not very big, not very big. This is St. Peter's from the air. You've got, of course, the dome, the basilica, this big facade. You've got the, where the Pope lives, administrative areas, Vatican museums, and the square with this beautiful colonnade that runs around it. And you see this little white line here, right there? That's the boundary between Rome and Vatican City. When you come into Rome, you can see St. Peter's from most anywhere, unless you're obviously far away. It kind of dominates the skyline. There's no building taller than the Basilica. Let me begin with a complaint about St. Peter's, okay? When you're standing on the main street that goes right down, right into the square, you see the dome, you see the facade, and there's a big obelisk. As you walk closer to it, it gets bigger and bigger, okay? Now, again, here's the front of the basilica. Here is the dome. I want you to watch what happens when you get closer to the front. Watch tell me what's going on here. Now watch. Where's the dome going? No dome. When they built this facade onto it in the mid-1600s, I don't know why they put it on, because it just blocks the dome when you get close. You really have to appreciate the dome. You have to be farther away. But right there on the front of it, in Latin, it says, "In honor of the Prince of the Apostles, Paul V of the Borghese family, a Roman, in 1612, made this in the seventh year of my pontificate." So it's dated, so we know exactly when it was dedicated. On that date, you have it right there. This basilica it was started in 1506, completed 120 years later. So it took a while. Again, it's just hard to grasp the enormity of this place. St. Peter's, why do they call it a square when it's round? I don't know. But here's the papal residence. When the Pope, on Wednesdays, it's either 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, I forget, he has a general audience. They have right in front of the Basilica, they have like a big awning, and you have to have a ticket to get in. Tickets are free, and they set up all kinds of chairs here. And he speaks, I don't know, for like an hour or whatever. But on Sunday, he comes to this window, and at noon, and he speaks a little bit. They say the Angelus, and he blesses the people. But you see this fence and that white line? That's the border. This is Rome. That is not Rome. I've got 1 foot in Italy and 1 foot out of Italy. In fact, I have 1 foot in one country and my right foot's in another country. Vatican City State has its own police force. It's got its own money. It's got its own postage. It's its own country, okay? And its own, called mayor, president, it's the Pope. When you go into the square, there's this enormous colonnade. It's hard to appreciate. There are 4 rows of columns, 1, 2, 3, and it's one you can't see out of the picture. But these run all the way around one side and all the way around the other. There are 284 columns, and they're massive. They're just massive. 284 of these. There's 140 statues around the top of the colonnade. This was built. The colonnade was built in the mid-1600s. It took them 11 years to build that. The whole square, I should say. This plus the square. As I said, this is where the Pope, well, up until Pope Francis, like he had those two rooms, and on Sunday for his blessing, those windows open up and they put like a red tapestry out, and the Pope speaks from that window to all those gathered in the square. It's hard, again, to comprehend how vast this is. This square holds 300,000 people. Try to grasp 300, over 250,000 people can gather in that square. And again, this wraps on the other side, so it's like two arms. Now, the great Baroque architect and sculptor Bernini decorated so much of the basilica and this colonnade. He designed the square. He decided there's two wonderful fountains in the square, one by Bernini, one by a man named Maderno. But Bernini carved this huge statue of the Emperor Constantine. We'll talk about him in a little bit. He did the baldacchino in the basilica, which we'll talk about. He did the Blessed Sacrament Chapel. He did the chair of St. Peter. Did the Holy Spirit window. He did a number of statues and monuments and tombs that are in the basilica itself. Now, one thing is interesting, people don't know this. If you ever go to St. Peter's, try this, you'll see how it works. Bernini wanted to show the difference between faith and reason. So when he built this colonnade, remember I said there are 4 rows of, there's 1, 2, 3, you have 4 rows of columns, okay? There's a spot in the middle of the, just off to the middle of the colonnade. When you stand on this and you look like I'm looking here, you see all of these columns are holding up this vast roof. This is, I don't know how much this thing weighs, but you see all of the columns holding it up, right? When you turn the other way, this is what you see. 1 row. There's 4. They're all there, but you can't, it takes faith to believe that what is unseen is supporting you. So here you see everything. That's reason. That's kind of how we operate in life. This is what Jesus calls us to, faith, to believe what you can't see. So he does it architecturally. Interesting little twist on it. As I said, I took this about a month ago when I was in Rome. There they put this little tapestry out, and the Pope, this is a little like awning to keep the sun off and the Mediterranean sun off him. And there he is right up there. Now you can't really see him very well unless you zoom in. And if you zoom in real close, that's what it would look like. But since you can't get that close and you're so far away, you just watch him on the Jumbotron. And they have 4 of them spread around the square. Okay. Again, I was fascinated by these fountains. I just found they're just beautiful. There's 2 of them, one on each side. This, by the way, this obelisk, we'll talk about it in a little bit. This was probably the last thing St. Peter saw before he died. We don't know for sure, but you can make a case to say this was the last thing he saw, and we'll talk about that in a minute, okay? But these 2 fountains flank this obelisk, but they're just absolutely beautiful. And you see, I said in front of the basilica, and you notice how this is going up, you're going uphill from the square, up these steps, into the basilica. But they have this awning, and they put an altar in there when he's going to have an outdoor mass, or when he's having his audience, he's under there to get out of the sun. Again, vast, just vast. When you walk into the basilica, you have to walk past this little white square. Anybody know what that is? He knows, but no, he's cheating. Deacon Tom knows. So you walk right past it. How's your Roman numerals? May the 13th, 1981. What happened on May 13th, 1981? This is Pope John Paul II's coat of arms. That's where the Pope was shot 3 times. 2 in the abdomen, 1 in the hand. So this is where he was almost killed. And they memorialized it by putting a little square in the square. So when you go in, you remember that's where Pope John Paul was shot. So you walk in, you have to go through, sadly to say, metal detectors, have your purses and belongings, x-rayed and all that stuff. So that's just part of life today. People enter the Basilica. If you ever want to see St. Peter's, you go at 7 o'clock in the morning when they open it. 9 o'clock, the tour buses start showing up, and people start showing up, and it gets very, very crowded. The Basilica is enormous. When you go into the main door, it just keeps going up. People pile in. This is when you stand at the back door, you're looking at. Now, for some reason, they put like barriers, like they put this wooden barriers with cloth, like red velvet or something. I don't know why they do that. It's there sometimes it's not there. But it's just enormous. When you look to the right, when you walk in the door, you see this. Anybody know what it is? It's the Pieta, Michelangelo's Pieta. Sadly to say, it's behind bulletproof glass. You used to be able to walk right up to it. But in 1972, a deranged man took a hammer to it and broke off Mary's finger and her nose. So they repaired it expertly. You probably can't tell the difference now, but you're separated, what? Deacon Tom, how far? 20 feet? Yeah, but you have this big glass wall. You can go up to it, but you can't get any closer. But it is just absolutely incredible. Michelangelo carved that when he was 23 years old. This was that we know of. This was his first work, I think we know of. It's just, there's no words to describe it. This is made out of marble, out of stone. To see what he could do with a chisel, it almost looks, I mean, take a look at Mary's robes and the cloth and how it folds. Now, Michelangelo, he was a sculptor. He was a painter, he was an engineer, he was a theologian, and he was a body snatcher. Because he would go into church graveyards and make a withdrawal. Because he wanted to study the human body and how ligaments and tendons and muscles worked. So you look at his sculptures, you look at especially his sculptures, he wanted everything to be correct, human anatomy. And he dissected people totally to get a grasp on people, how they work, not just on the outside, but how they work on the inside, which shows on the outside. Just take a look at first of all, how you carve stone to get these intricate folds, how you can carve fingers. Look at Mary's hand, just her fingernails, out of stone without breaking them off. It's just absolutely beyond my mind. See, look at the veins in Jesus' hand, nail marks. Look at all the wrinkles on his knuckles there. Absolutely incredible. Look at the way the folds of the garment, all hammered out of. His contention was that was already in the marble. He just removed what wasn't needed. That's the way he viewed his sculpture. And this is the only piece that he signed. The story goes that when he finished this piece, he was so proud of it, and it was on display, and he was standing there watching it, and he heard 2 people looking at it, and they admitted its beauty, but they attributed it to some lesser-known sculptor. So he went in at night and took out a hammer and chisel that says, Michelangelo Buonarroti from Florence made this. So forever, there's no mistake who carved that thing, okay? Kind of a wild-looking man, wasn't he? I guess artists, anyways. The Basilica, I said, is huge. This holds 60,000 people. 60,000. You know, when you go into a Catholic church, by the door is what? Baptism. I mean, a holy water font, right? You bless yourself, remember of your baptism with holy water. St. Peter's has holy water fonts, one on each side of the first pillar you come to. Now, it's beautiful, okay? I took this picture a couple weeks ago. After I took the picture, I put my phone down, and a lady walked up, and she wanted her husband to take a picture of her by the font. So when she stood there, I took my own picture. So this is it, and this is her by the holy water font. And that's not a small lady. Well, she's probably my height. But everything has to be huge to keep perspective. Nothing can be small. It just wouldn't fit. This whole thing is gigantic, so every little thing has to be a big thing. So you reach in there, if you get your holy water, and bless yourself. If you look to the right, look to the left, opposite the Pieta, what do you think that is? The baptism font. Now, what it actually is that the Emperor Hadrian, the Roman emperor, died in 138, and he was buried in a sarcophagus. And this was the lid. They went on the top of it. Now, I'm not quite sure how the church got a hold of it. Dumped the emperor out, I guess. And they made a baptismal font, and somewhere in the Middle Ages, this Baroque thing, I don't like it, sits on top of it. And so that's the font. It's huge, but the building is huge. But I must admit, one Sunday I was in the Basilica, and I looked over, and there was a baptism going on. Oh, I walked over, and they had this is Italy, remember. They had a stainless steel salad bowl sitting here. They baptized the baby in a little aluminum salad bowl. So, I don't know, just saying. You start walking, the flooring is just all inlaid marble. It's just absolutely incredible. Just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Again, you're looking down the Basilica, and you see this big thing. It's called a baldacchino. It's like a canopy, a bronze canopy that's over the papal altar. And if you keep walking, you come at the back end. I'll show you that. But as you walk through the Basilica, you see all kinds of statuary and monuments everywhere, all along the sides. It's one of my favorites. Bernini, he carved this in marble, but out of bronze. He had one of the popes. This is for Pope Alexander, somebody or other. He has the skeleton holding the hourglass, the sands of time, to remind you we all have our time running out. Again, more and more tombs. And right in the middle, not in the middle, but where the papal altar is, on the four corners of these enormous statues. This is the statue of St. Helena, the Emperor Constantine's mother, who found the true cross. Another one is St. Andrew, who was crucified on an X cross. And you have St. Longinus. He's purported to be the Roman soldier that used the spear that pierced Jesus' side. And you have St. Veronica. And these enormous statues by Bernini are around the four corners of the baldacchino. I don't know who that is. So as you get towards the focus of it, this is the papal altar. And this is what's a baldacchino. Again, it's like a huge spiral, 4 columns that hold up the canopy. It's all cast in bronze by Bernini. It took 9 years to build this and install this. It's just incredible. When you walk in the Basilica, this is the front door here, okay? And see these in the main floor, right in the main aisle, they have these little markers that show where basilicas and large churches in the world would end if they were put on the footprint of the basilica. So there's number 1 is where it's the beginning of St. Peter's. Have you ever been to St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York? It's enormous. If you put it in St. Peter's, it would end right here, right by the papal altar. This thing keeps going farther up here. So you can see if you were in St. Paul's in London, you would end here. If you went to this, you'd be hearing here. But they just have just kind of give you some perspective. Just absolutely incredible. Only the Pope says Mass at that altar. This is the front door we came in, and you walk. This is looking at the papal altar over towards one of the side naves. Again, this is all bronze. It looks like it's tassels. It's all metal. It's huge. And this is looking up at the dome up here, straight. The dome is directly over this baldachin. Right over the papal altar is the dome. When you pass, like, if you keep going past the papal altar, you come to it's called the altar of the chair. This is the other end of the basilica, and what they have is an altar there, and Bernini designed this bronze. Looks like a chair. And inside here is supposed to be a chair that St. Peter used. So it's the altar of the chair. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anyone's ever looked, but that's the thing. It's supposed to contain the altar, the chair of St. Peter. And right above it is this beautiful window of the Holy Spirit. So there's the chair. I mean, inside there's supposed to be a wooden chair. But right above it is this beautiful window of the Holy Spirit. This window, what's it made out of? What? Nope, not made out of glass, not made out of stained glass. Made out of stone, alabaster. It's translucent. The sun shines through it. This Holy Spirit, the wings are 6 feet across. So it's a beautiful. When the sun is coming through that thing, you can see, when you walk in the back door, when you walk in the front door of the cathedral, the basilica, you see this Holy Spirit at the other end. It's just incredible. So that's 6 feet, wing to wing. Some papal ceremony, but you can see how they just fill this thing up. I want you to remember, we're going to talk more about this. This is a depression in front of the papal altar. This goes down. There's steps that go down. You're not allowed to, it's really only used just by clergy. I don't know, you have to be a very high official to go down there, and I'll show you why in a few minutes. Again, this beautiful bronze baldacchino. Looking up, the papal altar's there, looking up at the dome. Michelangelo was the architect of this basilica. He also engineered the dome. So as I said, they say Renaissance man, that's where it came from. All these talents he had. So looking up at Michelangelo's dome is just absolutely incredible. Now, Michelangelo died, I think he was 88 when he died, and it's called the drum. He died when the drum was complete. He never saw it completed. He just saw the drum part finished. But to engineer, and today you'd have to have, what kind of a degree would you have to be charged with something like this massive thing? But they gave it to a painter, gave it to a sculptor. He designed that. It's just incredible. Isn't it beautiful? And right across here, these huge letters, "You are Peter, and upon this rock, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. And I will give to you the keys of the kingdom of heaven." That's what that says in Latin around there. Beautiful. This, if I go right here, maybe I can show you. This thing is so tall, well, right in the. This says, "To the glory of St. Peter, Pope Sixtus V made this in 1590, in the 5th year of his pontificate." So he dated it for himself, put his name on it, and dated it, so you know right when this took place. But I want to just go back for a second. This baldacchino that goes up into the dome, you could put the Statue of Liberty and its base with her torch there in her hand and still have 150 feet to go. So it's tall. just before you come to the baldacchino and the papal altar, there's a statue of St. Peter. It's a bronze statue. They date it from the year about either 1200 to 700. They're not quite sure. We're going to talk for a minute about, this St. Peter's is the new one. This is the second St. Peter's. This was built in the 1500s. And this statue came from the first St. Peter's that existed on the same site. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So this is either, could be well over 1,000 years old. But it sits there as a monument and a reminder of who this place is named after and his importance. And people come up and they touch the foot of St. Peter's statue, okay? Or sometimes they kiss the foot out of respect. You kiss something for 1,000 years. Can you imagine to have worn that bronze down to that from people kissing it or touching it? How many millions of people would have to do that to wear that metal down from what it was to what it is? When you head towards the sacristy, there is a list of all the popes that are buried in the basilica. There are 149 popes from St. Peter. Now, I took this picture during Pope Benedict's reign. So you have John Paul II. Today it says Pope Benedict XVI on there. But there are 149 popes there. Okay. One of them is Pope John the 23rd. When they opened his casket, I don't know why they did, he was not corrupt. This is the body of Pope John the 23rd. It's not a mask, it's not wax, it's him. So that's I'm sure one of the causes for his being sanctified is because his body is incorrupt. And that's in one of the altars right there in the basilica. Saint John Paul II, his body is in the side altar on the right side of the main nave. Anyone who asked me when I went there to say some prayers for their intention, this is where I knelt and said the prayers at the grave of John Paul II. Now, there are these wonderful images, okay? Pretty, right? Pretty, right? Pretty, right? Pretty, right? Wonderful paintings? Wrong. There isn't one painting in this basilica. What is this? It's a mosaic. You know what a mosaic is? It's little stones, like the size of your fingernail, or it's a piece of glass or ceramic or colored whatever. And they assemble it in little bitty pieces, and they create, okay, see, it's up close, a little bit of colored glass or little ceramics, and when you back away, you get this. This is as bright as it was 400 years ago. Doesn't change. Paintings had to be kept out of the sunlight. And you shouldn't be taking flashes of paintings that it degrades the color. Not this. This is the way it was the day they finished it. Vatican grottos. This is where it starts getting interesting. This is St. Peter's, okay? Looking at it from the side, the baldacchino, the main nave. There are some steps right over here that go down, and underneath here is a level that is filled with little grottos in which popes are buried. Not all the popes; they're spread out everywhere. But these go. This is under the main nave of the basilica, and so you'll see this. And there's Pope Pius the 12th. There's Pope Benedict praying at the grave of Pius the 12th. Pope John Paul I. Remember, he only was like a month. He was Pope, the smiling Pope. It's his grave. Pope Paul VI is there. And then countless other ones. I have no idea who these guys are. They go on and on and on. Boniface VIII, Pope Innocent the IX, And it goes on. Now, this is all below the Basilica, okay? So you have the Basilica, you're one floor down, and you go to all these little places, okay? You with me? In 1939, Pope Pius XI died, and he was going to be buried down here in the grotto. Pope Pius XII, who followed him, wanted to expand the grotto to make more rooms. Now, it's dangerous when you're, you're digging up underneath this massive thing, a lot of weight over your head, but he wanted to expand it. As the workmen were digging down to make it bigger, they broke through, and it was hollow. I shouldn't say hollow, but they found there was a room under where they were digging, and they called the Pope and said, "We found something under this level here." And Pius XII had a love for archaeology. So he says, "Excavate it, but be careful that the walls don't come a-tumbling down." So they dug out, and they were in a room, and they realized it was a sarcophagus. It was a mausoleum. Now, you know, you've been to like Sunset Cemetery, what a mausoleum is. Our mausoleums here are like big buildings, but they also could be a small room in which a family would be buried. And they found they were in a room of a Roman family. Pagan tombs were in this room. So they kept digging, and there was one next to it. And there was one next to it. And there was one next to it. And very carefully and gingerly, they kept excavating, being aware they're 2 stories down. They got how many millions of tons of marble and bronze and who knows what above your head. Dangerous work. They did it for, 15 years or so. And this is what it looked like. It was a Roman cemetery called a necropolis. Necropolis in Latin means a city of the dead. And what they discovered is this was, once upon a time, before any of this existed, an open-air cemetery. That it was like an alley or a narrow street. And families would have a little mausoleum in which their loved ones would be buried. The Romans, for many centuries, would cremate their dead and put them in some kind of an urn. They did this for a good amount of time. So then later they began to bury bodies. But they're finding all of these family mausoleums next to it. So it was like an outdoor street that would have been open to the air, and it went under the Vatican grottos, and it kind of ended here, under the main altar. Okay? These were all pagan tombs, Roman tombs. Let me jump back in history a little bit to understand that. When we were talking about Rome, we talked about the Roman circuses. A circus was a place of entertainment. This was called the Circus of Nero. We talked about the Circus Maximus means the greatest circus. They would use it for chariot races. If you saw Ben-Hur, that would have been in the Circus Maximus. Circus Maximus, this was Nero, the Emperor Nero, who was a maniacal, evil man. Here, like in Circus Maximus, they killed people. They did it in the Colosseum, but they didn't kill Christians in the Colosseum. It was done in the Circus Maximus in here. So Nero, for his own entertainment, with a love of blood sport, he had his own chariot races he would enjoy, and he relished killing our people, Christians. He would feed them to wild animals. He'd have gladiators kill them. He had a great joy of taking our people, crucifying them, and setting them on fire. So I don't mean gruesome, but it's part of our history. This was a place where lions would maul and kill Christians. It was also where St. Peter was crucified. The understanding is that Peter was crucified upside down, okay? When see that obelisk? That stood in the middle of Nero's circus. That's why I said, now this was later moved, but this could have been the very last thing Peter saw. This now sits in St. Peter's Square. But my point is this. When Peter died, this was a cemetery. This didn't exist. This circus sat at the bottom of a hill. Okay, remember the 7 hills of Rome? There's the Esquiline, Palatine, all these. There's a lot of hills in Rome. This little hill, which is outside, there's a Tiber River here. This kind of sits on the outskirts of Rome. But there was a hill here. You know what the name of the hill was? The Vatican Hill. The Vatican Hill. This circus, Nero Circus, sat right here. The terrain starts to go up, and it starts to go up here. So it's going up this way, and it's going up this way. You with me? It's important. When Peter was killed, his disciples, fellow Christians, buried him. They would have buried. It was the custom in those days that a martyr would be buried near the place of his martyrdom to preserve the significance of the site, the holiness of this. Where a martyr died, they tried to bury him nearby. So Peter was taken, his body was taken here and taken up the hill a little bit. And he was given a burial of a simple man, a poor man's grave, which means he would have been put in the ground. He would have had 6 tiles placed over his body, 2, 2, 2, with a tile on each end to keep out the elements and to put a name on it so people would know who was there. So he's given a poor man's burial partway up that hill, all right? As time passed, this cemetery started to develop. Romans started to bury their loved ones, and they were building this mausoleum. They were intruding into that hill. So you have this hill going uphill. You've got these Roman mausoleums heading towards where Peter's body was. And they were getting so close to his body that what the Christians did, they took Peter's bones and they mushed them together so the Romans' buildings wouldn't intrude on it. Here you can see that Roman necropolis. You can walk down. Is that kind of blurry? This would have been open air, open to the, remember, when it was first built, there was no basilicas, there was just this Roman cemetery. It was like a street. People would come down and a family would visit their loved ones. Now that's a modern, of course, ladder there. But this was all open air, and there would be a family name on here. So you could go in there and visit your dead. This describes the person. These little niches would have urns with the ashes. I would assume a lot of these urns are now in the Vatican museums. This is all excavated 2 stories down under the basilica. Dangerous place to work. Okay. Family name. The original color is, remember, the color is still there. Here they were burying some bodies. The Romans would have these exquisitely, very expensive carved sarcophagus for their loved ones. Color's still there. They have these, on the walls, these still remnants of the mosaics are there. Mosaics on the floor. The ceilings, still there. He went for a walk, wanted to see it for himself. He looked in. And not just him, anybody can do it. If you go to Rome, you make arrangements for what's called the Scavi tour. The Scavi is the Italian word for excavations. And you get a tour in your language, and they take maybe 15 people at a time, and they take you all the way, explain all this to you. But this is the Basilica now, right? The circus we're talking about ran like this, like the race course. It ran like right here. Peter died and was taken up this hill and buried somewhere partway up this hill. So you have this alley with the sarcophagus, and somewhere near the top is where Peter's body lay. About 100 years after he died, somebody built what this is called a trophy of Gaius. It's called a trophy. You know what a trophy? What's a trophy? It's like a victory monument or victory monument. When you get a trophy for winning say the Super Bowl or for whatever, it's a little monument to say we're victors. So someone built around the year 150 or so, a monument saying that Peter was victorious. In his death for Christ, he won. He wasn't defeated, he was victorious. This is probably what it looked like. They put a wall up, like a red wall, and this was the trophy, the monument, called the Trophy of Gaius, because Gaius was a Roman priest, a pagan priest, who left writing that said that he had seen the trophy of Paul outside Rome on the Ostia Way, where his basilica is today, where his body is today, and he saw the trophy of Peter on the Vatican Hill. So we know that's where he was buried. That's from a non-Christian person. So this is now this little trophy, it's small. That's maybe 3 feet, and that's maybe 5. See these little columns? Remember them. They're about 5 feet tall. In fact, this is probably what it would have looked like. This was a typical monument back in those days. So people would come there to pay respects to St. Peter, the founder of the Church of Rome. Now, there were times the church was terribly persecuted, depending on the emperor. Sometimes the emperor didn't persecute it. But for a couple hundred years, there was times of peace and times of violence. But when there was no persecution, people would come to the tomb to say prayers. Now, do you notice they kind of show the angle of the hill? When in the year 312, the Roman emperor, Constantine, a very important person in our history, Constantine, Roman emperor, became Catholic, became a Christian. Everything changed. No more persecution. In fact, if the emperor is Catholic, you ought to be Catholic. So a big influx of people into the church. You can guess their motivation, I don't know. But one of the first things he did, he wanted to build a shrine to the founder of the Church of Rome. And they knew where Peter was buried because there had been a devotion to him for so many years there. So he wanted to build a church, a basilica, in honor of Peter. Now, there's a hill. He could have built this basilica at the bottom of the hill where Peter would have died. He could have built it on the top of the hill so people could see it. Where would you not build the basilica? On the side of the hill. You don't build a big building on the side of a hill, unless you're Constantine. What he did, he removed hundreds and hundreds of tons of soil from up here, and that Roman necropolis, he took off the roofs, filled them with all this dirt to make a foundation for the church that was going to sit on top of it. By doing this, he also preserved it because it was buried in soil, so it was under a building and was filled with soil. That's why those colors are still there, the mosaics are still there. Constantine filled it. What he did that no one would ever dream of doing is he desecrated a Roman cemetery. You never did that. The Romans had respect for their dead. You never destroy a cemetery, let alone build on top of it. Constantine did. He must have had a very good reason. Okay? So this basilica was built on the side of the Vatican Hill. He removed the top, filled in the bottom, and he built a St. Peter's Basilica. This is what it would have looked like. Okay? Now, there's a main nave, and I'm going to be talking about that right now. See at the end? This is probably what it looked like, the basilica, and they would have a big atrium in front. There would have been like the facade, and you'd walk in here kind of decompress before you went into the church. Remember this? I said the trophy. Peter, remember I said he mushed his bones together as the Roman cemetery was intruding on this? His bones would have been in there. They have this 5-foot columns and that little like table there. Constantine, we have an altar. Every Catholic church has an altar, right? In Constantine's Basilica, he didn't have one. He took this trophy and he put a marble box around it. Big marble box. And around it, he put, this is called porphyry. It is at that time, it was only found in Egypt. It's a very, very hard stone, a very precious stone because it's purple, which is a royal color. Only the emperor wore purple. But he took precious imperial purple and put around this box over that trophy, a little monument for Peter. And what he did is, I said he didn't have an altar. He had this where the altar would have been. So people come into the basilica and look in there and see the trophy and where Peter's bones would have been. When they wanted to say Mass, the deacon would bring out a wooden table and put it right there, and the Pope would say Mass on it. So I want you to remember this. See that box? If you went to the back of it, this is what you'd see. It's like, see this guy standing here? Look on the back. There's the box, right? This purple porphyry and that stripe. Don't forget that. You with me? Don't forget, it'll be a test. So, the front of it and the back of it. Let me just go back. Remember I said that they didn't have an altar. They had just a wooden table. Well, they did that for about 250 years. And in the year 600, Pope Gregory the Great said, I had enough of this. I don't want the deacon bringing the table. I want an altar. And I want to say Mass on top of this. So he had the floor of the basilica raised 6 feet. And he had an altar put up on here. But he left a depression with stairs. Remember I showed you those stairs that go down so people can still go down the steps and look in and see that trophy and see Peter's grave, okay? So now the new floor of the basilica was up here with the new altar there, Pope Gregory's altar. Did that in year 600. 500 years later, 1100, Pope Callistus said, well, that altar's not big enough. I want a bigger one. So he had an altar built over that altar, not above it, around it. He just expanded it, okay? And that went on for 400 years. So by the year 1500, that building is like 1,200 years old. Cracks, leaks, rats, stuff's falling down. They couldn't save it. We had to tear it down. So they decided to build a new St. Peter's. Ta-da! That's what we have today. So what you have here is a cutaway. There is that trophy, like the leg. And then you have Pope Gregory's altar that he built above it. You have another altar. Callistus goes over that. Then they built the new, this is the floor of the present basilica. And this is Pope Clement's altar, he's the one responsible for that altar. But take a look at this. The grave, the box, one altar, 2 altars, the present altar. If you drop a plumb line from here, end up there. Does that say something? This is not done by accident. This is all done on purpose. So again, we have the basilica, we have the grottos where the popes are buried, you have the Roman necropolis, you have, we believe, is the tomb of Peter. They probably could excavate more out towards the Tiber River, but I think they're afraid to go any further. How much can you undermine this mass of a building? Okay? So I think they're done excavating. So you have the trophy, right? That's one of those legs. It's right under the main altar. I don't think they've dug into it because I think they're afraid of this whole thing collapsing. So you can see one of those legs, one of those little pillars of that trophy. Still there. Around it are walls, and there is graffiti scratched into these walls in Greek, Christian symbols. And one of them says, Peter is within, or Peter is here. It's graffiti. People scratch things for a reason. they found bones. They found bones and remnants of purple cloth with gold thread in it. They had these bones forensically examined and independently done outside the church. They wanted people to say, put this together. What kind of a person was this? And forensics had determined it was the bones of one man, it was definitely a male, one person, with a sturdy build and between 60 and 80 years old. That's what they found there. And there were many Christian, remember all these pagan graves? Around this grave, there was all kinds of Christian graves jammed around it, trying to get buried as close as they could to this trophy thing, this monument. Okay? So what you have is the grotto, you have the necropolis, you have the monument of Peter. All goes right up. Like same thing. Peter's grave, the trophy, the altars, the present altar. In the present basilica, if you walk in the present basilica, you go up to the papal altar and you look down, and there's these steps that kind of go down like this. You're going down. I said only certain high clergy allow. I've never been down there. But there is a box. People think that's Peter's bones. It is not. It's called the pallia. The Pope gives what they are like wool things that are given to metropolitans, which are like archbishops of very important dioceses in the world. That's where that's kept. But on the other side of this wall is, remember Constantine made that box with the porphyry with that purple stripe? That's behind this wall. Because if you walk down in the Vatican grottos where the popes are, if you walk all the way around on the first basement floor, you come to the other side of this, you come to a chapel. It's called the Clementine Chapel. It's not very big. It's just got like 3 kneelers and an altar. But as you walk towards this, remember this? And you remember this box put over it? Remember the back of the box? There it is. From about the year 350, when the first basilica was built. If you can say Mass, when you say Mass there, you can put your hand through the grate and just about touch that box built by the emperor over the trophy. It's right there, still there. You can see it today. Pope Francis, can you imagine he's just a few feet from his predecessor. Had the chance to celebrate Mass there with Deacon Tom and his wife, Barb. Now, that being said, are those Peter's bones? There's no name tag that says, hello, my name is Peter. We don't know. Circumstantial evidence. There's no other city in the entire world that claims to have the bones of Peter. Nowhere else. Constantine built a basilica to honor the apostle and designed it in such a way that he did it even though it was hard to do, at a certain way on the side of a hill. The bones they found were encrusted with dirt, meaning they showed that he was buried, whoever was that body that was buried in the ground. And the soil that was found on the bones was the same kind of soil that's found under the basilica. So it's all circumstantial. You can't prove it, but it's a high likelihood that is actually the bones of St. Peter. Okay? So the Pope feels very confident, and most anyone would say, how could it not be? But again, you draw your own conclusions. Now, we're about as low as you can go. What if we go up? Let's go up on the roof. Okay? This is the basilica. Now, what if you want to go up on the roof? Now, right in the middle is a statue of Jesus holding a cross, and there are 6 apostles, and there are 6 apostles. Now, you can go up on the roof. You can walk. There's 320 steps from the floor to the roof. You can do that, or you can take an elevator. They've installed an elevator. It costs, €5 or something. You go up to the roof. This is the roof of the basilica, and this is like a side area. There's side naves. And, you know, you need light in a basilica to see, so they have these light wells, these light towers to bring light into it, so they put fences so you don't fall in, I guess. But you can walk around. They have a souvenir shop, of course, and there's restrooms up there, and you can, I don't know if can you get something to eat? I'm not sure. But you walk around. Now, you walk to the front. This is what it looks like from the front, the Jesus and the apostles, right? When you're on the roof, this is what you see. What do you notice? They're not finished. Why aren't they finished? What? No one is supposed to see them. Why would you carve the back of statues when you're only going to be seeing them from the ground, you know? So they didn't expect people would ever be on the roof, so they never finished them. Okay, you're up on the roof, where I took that picture. What if you wanted to go up, up, up? How about up here? Like those people. They say 25 people could fit in that ball. 9 people could fit in the cross. Now, you can't go up there. This is high as you're allowed to go. But how do you get up there? Well, first of all, you got to go inside the dome. So you go from the roof, you go inside the Michelangelo's dome, and you look down, and you really appreciate the floor for the first. Look at that intricate, beautiful inlaid marble. You look across, and you have the 4 evangelists in those words, "You are Peter, and upon," well, 4 of these, beautiful. "You are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." And you can walk around inside the dome there. But if you want to go up, though, see that door? You go in there, and it says cupola, which means Italian for dome. So you go in there, and you start to climb. You start to climb. 231 steps. Now, they're smiling. I don't know if they're smiling on the inside, Deacon Tom and Barb again. But it's now when Michelangelo designed this, he engineered it. There's steps that go up, and the steps that go down. I don't know how I have no idea how you do that. So you don't meet anybody. So you go up, and you go up, and you go up, and you're climbing. Now, you're climbing a dome. So what happens when you get near the top? You're walking like this, a little bit unnerving. And when you get to the top, there's a little bit of steps, and there's a rope. And you hang onto the rope. You don't pull yourself up. It's to steady yourself to step out to this. So that's what you see from the top. Again, there's the line, Rome, and the main road into the Tiber River. This is the roof of the basilica. That's where I took my picture of the statues here. So there's the roof of the basilica. Right up here, you're looking down. There is that obelisk that used to be in Nero's circus. It's just magnificent view. When you look to the left, you see what's called the Vatican Museums. They call it the church's attic. You know, attic is where you store stuff. This is 2,000 years of history, from not just church, but world history. It takes forever to walk through it. You enter at the far side of the Vatican wall there, and you go through it. And gallery after gallery after gallery of just incredible treasures that are there for you to enjoy. And here at the end is what? That's the Sistine Chapel, okay? So, when you're going to leave up in the dome, there's a little stairway you get down, and then you have the steps that go down. So if you're kind of claustrophobic, this may not be the best place to go. The Sistine Chapel. In 1502, Pope Julius II told Michelangelo he wanted Michelangelo to carve him a tomb for when he died. He wanted massive. He wanted in the new St. Peter's, he wanted 20 Michelangelo statues on his tomb. He had an ego this big. So Michelangelo worked on it for about 4 years. Then the Pope said, "Shh, I'm pulling you off the job. I want you to paint my ceiling." Michelangelo said, "No, I'm a sculptor, not a painter." So they fought. Michelangelo was a crazy man too, and Julius II wasn't much better, but they had battle of wits, but the Pope won. And so Michelangelo was commissioned to paint the ceiling of the chapel. This ceiling is 68 feet tall, which is about 7 stories, about 10 feet to a story. Seven stories up. It's a big room. So he erects this scaffolding up 7 stories, and he begins decorating the ceiling. And this is what he comes up with. The ceiling of the chapel, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9 of the great stories of Genesis, from the creation to the flood. How did he paint that? This is not a painting as much as it is a fresco. What he did was this. He's got this 7-story scaffolding. He would take a piece of paper, I don't know how big. He would sketch what he wanted, the outline of what he wanted to draw, okay? Make a sketch of it. Then he would take an awl, like a pokey thing, and poke holes in the outline, all right? Then he would drag this paper up to the ceiling, up to his top. He would have a bucket of plaster. He'd plaster part of that ceiling. He'd hold it was called a cartoon. That's what they referred to it, as a paper with little holes in it. He'd hold up to the wet plaster. He would take a bag of powdered charcoal and tap the outline. And we took the paper away and throw it over the edge. He'd have little dots that outline what he wanted to paint. He would take his paints, and before that plaster would dry, he'd paint, so that the paint is absorbed into the wet plaster, and then when the plaster dried, the paint is a part of the plaster. Okay? So can you imagine it took him 4 years to do this, on his back or up front like this, drawing, putting holes, padding the paper with the little dots, and painting. And it's just incredible. When you're trying to look at it, you're looking up 7 stories, so it's very difficult to see, but it's just incredible. The great of the creation of man. Now, remember, they didn't have electric lights in the 1500s, 1600s. So how'd they illuminate this? Candles. 400 years of candle smoke and soot and grime and pollution takes its toll, because everything goes up. And so by the time 1980 comes, this is what it looked like. And people for centuries thought, well, this is what Michelangelo did. Isn't that beautiful? It's just a work of art. Well, the church, I don't know whether the Pope or who, but the church decided to have this cleaned. And it took them from 1980 to 1994, 14 years to clean it. And it went from this to this. And a lot of art critics said they've ruined it. It looks like an Easter egg. It looks like it's just not real. This is the way Michelangelo did it. No, this is what Michelangelo did. And again, this before and after, on one of the side things, these are called Sibyls, before and after. What's interesting too, this is this of God creating Adam, right? You've all seen this before. Michelangelo, besides being a sculptor and a painter and an engineer and a grave robber, he was a theologian. How do you depict God creating life, God sharing his life with his creature? So you've seen this all before. He has the spark of life come from God, just a spark of life. God's life comes into his creature. What a beautiful thing. And of course, before it was cleaned, it just was like this. But what's really interesting is, like in the human body, no, not a heart, a brain. Cut a human brain in half. It looks like, doctor, it looks like this. Here is the mind of God creating Adam, okay? Creating man. But what's interested, these are the angels, okay, surrounding God in his glory. But you notice somebody in the mind of God? Who's that? Who's that? Eve. Eve is in the mind of God when he creates Adam. Perhaps even before he creates the man, the woman is being embraced by God. What a beautiful image. What does that say to us? You know? He created man, but he created God. The mind of God was the woman. Beautiful. Also, interesting theologian. Here God creates the sun and the moon and the stars. He wanted to say God is all-powerful, and God is eternal, and God is everywhere. God has no beginning. There's no before and there's no after. God just exists. How do you show that in a painting? That God is before us, that God is after us? Well, maybe this way. You got God from the front, you got God from the back. We perhaps wouldn't do that today in our paintings, but he wanted to show that God is always there, no matter where you live, before, after. So that's, as I said, people don't notice that, but that's God from the front and that's God from the back. Michelangelo had no problem with nudity, even when it comes to God. And of course, the flood, just beautiful. Then, 25 years later, he says to Michelangelo, come back, why don't you paint my back wall? And he'd, no, I'm done painting. No, he's not done painting. He'd painted stuff in the meantime. But he wanted I don't know whether the Pope wanted it or Michelangelo's decision to paint the Last Judgment. And by the way, this is the Sistine, you may have seen it. If you ever watch Agony and the Ecstasy with Charlton Heston, it's depicted very nicely. When the popes have been elected here for hundreds of years, then there's a little altar there, and the three cardinals sit up there, and all the other cardinals are along here, and they vote. They vote in the morning, they vote in the evening. Whoever gets the majority, if he says yes, he's Pope then. So Michelangelo's commission took him 4 years to paint the Last Judgment. And again, it's his imagination. And there's a circle, this is a spiral. You have these people descending to hell. You have these people ascending to heaven. And of course, you have Jesus and Mary. And you have these souls are being pulled down into the depths of it's just awful. Take a look at the way he depicts this. Horrible, horrible fate. But what's even interesting is, look at this fellow here. When he realizes what's happened to him and the way he lived, the horror of it. But you have the souls going up into heaven, and Mary with next to Jesus. Grand. It's worth going to Rome just to see this. Incredible. When you leave the Basilica, okay, this was I said on Wednesday he has a papal audience, and you get a ticket, they're free, and you can you line up, get a seat. I took this picture when Benedict was Pope, and after he gives his talk, he talks to people. Now, the Pope has a general audience in good weather. Now, in inclement weather, this is called the Paul VI Audience Hall. And while this will seat 300,000, but for the papal audience, I don't know how many, 50,000, I don't know. But here, this only seats 3,600. But in the audience hall, the Pope, if it was raining or something, they would have it in there, just a chair, Swiss guards. Pope comes in. He says, hello. And he speaks for a little bit. Then you may go down and talk to some of the people. Swiss guards are the guards for the Pope. They've been doing their guarding since the year 1506. That's 517 years the Swiss guard have been guarding the Pope. If you want to be a Swiss guard, you want to apply, you have to be unmarried. At the time you apply, you can get married if you're accepted. You have to be a Roman Catholic. You have to be a Swiss citizen. And you have to be between 19 and 30 years old, and you had to be at least 5'8". I don't know why. But there they are in all their glory. Designed by whom? Whenever I ask a question, you say Michelangelo. That's the safest way to go. He designed these uniforms. From the dome again, if you look down, like this is Rome. That's the street. So this is part of the Vatican wall. So this little like apartment building, you look right down. It's a guest house. Nothing fancy. This is where Pope Francis lives. He didn't want to live in the big palace kind of a thing. So at the end of the day, he goes here. This is his office. Compare this to the Oval Office in the White House. That's his office. From his office, there's his bedroom. Simple bed, I presume that's a bathroom, I guess. Little lavish bed, but not too big. And at the end of the day, he goes home, take his shoes off, relax. And when he goes home, everybody else goes home. Evening comes, sun sets over St. Peter's, lights come on, Rome goes to sleep. Arrivederci, San Pietro. So that's it. Are there any questions, anything you saw or something not clear? Nothing? Yeah?
Are there people still being capable and training themselves to do some of these things that have been created? The pillars alone had to take generations of capability.
Is this artwork still being preserved? Like these mosaics had to be repaired. There's a whole mosaic school that, I shouldn't say school, school I would say. They repair things like that. They do tapestries that are getting old and worn and faded. They repair things. So this is being preserved, but you can never recreate what we just saw. But the mosaics are being, that skill is still being passed on. Yes? Loud, please.
I don't need this. I can talk loud enough.
I can't hear.
All right, Father.
Yeah.
As far as cleaning the stuff goes, I belong to a group called Patron of the Vatican Art.
Oh, do you?
That's part of our job is to clean that stuff. And some of them take years and years and years and lots of money to repair.
That whole colonnade we showed, how nice and bright white it is, they spent years cleaning that colonnade from just the Rome pollution. It was cleaned for the millennium when they went from to the year 2000. I think the Knights of Columbus oversaw that. The cleaning was a massive job to clean get all of that grime out of that, all of that was hundreds of columns. So yeah, they're still being cleaned and repaired, and because again, that's not cheap. Remember, the first basilica only lasted 1,200 years, but then it fell apart. This thing has got to be cared for, repaired. It ages too, like we all do. So, yeah.
Basilica Notre Dame is being repaired as we speak. It was burned at one time. I think they've been doing it for 5 or 6 years.
I just watched a video on that about 2 hours ago on the repair of Notre Dame in Paris. They had a massive fire on April the 15th, 2019, and they wanted to repair it within a 5-year period, so it should be done, I think, next year. But again, these buildings, they're masterpieces, and we've got to take care of them. Anything else? Yeah. Louder, please.
Can you talk briefly about the obelisk?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I said that obelisk that used to stand in the middle of Hadrian's, of Nero's circus. Make sure I get these numbers right. 1 second. Well, I can't find it. That obelisk, the Romans had a great appreciation of Egypt. There are more Egyptian obelisks in Rome than in Egypt. When Rome conquered Egypt, they hauled all of these, so many of them back to, now they had to lower them in Egypt, drag them to the Mediterranean, get them on a ship, get them into Rome, get them off the barges, erect them inland. So it's massive engineering to do that. This obelisk Nero had brought for his own circus. In the 1600s, when the colonnade was finished, the Pope wanted that moved from the side of the bottom of Vatican Hill, next to the Basilica, into the center of the colonnade. And it took like 700 men, I don't know how many winches, I don't know how many ropes, how many animals to get that erected. And it's been there since 1650 or something. But as I said, they moved it, and that was stood in the middle of Nero's circus. Remember I showed you that bottom of the hill. So they moved that, and that's the importance of that, yeah. One more, yeah.
Did Michelangelo paint certain people's faces onto the ceiling?
He painted people he didn't like in hell. He painted some cardinals he didn't like. He put them in hell. He put his own face in a number of things, yeah. But if he didn't like you, he would put you where you shouldn't be, yeah. Okay, last thing. When I was in Rome a month or so ago, I was in St. Peter's Square, and I had some medals. I brought with me some crosses and some St. Francis medals, and the Holy Father blessed them. When I gave my talk a month ago on Rome, I offered some of these to anyone who wanted one. If you didn't get one and you like something blessed by Pope Francis about 5 weeks ago, Deacon Tom has them there. You can certainly take one on your way out. Also, if you're interested in reading, there's a book called Basilica. That is, have you ever seen the movie The Chosen? We're showing it here every other week, where the director takes kind of an imaginative view of, say, the different apostles. He kind of fills in the blanks of what the scriptures don't say. He fleshes out their personality, what they could have been like. This book documents how this basilica was built. It's an easy read, but he fleshes out Michelangelo's personality, Pope Julius II's personality, what was needed to do to build this monster of a building and to decorate it as it did. So if you want a nice, easy read, it's called Basilica by R.A. Scotti. Pick it up sometime or look at it. It's a very nice, easy read. Okay, thank you. If anyone wants to talk to me after, please feel free.